The first time Elias Crowley saw her, he thought the night had finally broken him. The moon hung low over the plains like a wounded coin, and the wind pressed against his ranch house as if it wanted inside. Elias had lived alone for 7 years, 7 winters of silence after his wife died, 7 summers of dust and routine. He rose before dawn, worked until his bones ached, and slept with one eye open, not out of fear but habit. That night the knock came once, heavy, certain. When he opened the door, she filled the frame like a storm-given shape. Tall, broad, shouldered, wrapped in a dark shawl, her presence bending the air. Her face was weathered yet striking, eyes deep with a sorrow that looked older than the land itself. She spoke without greeting, her voice low and steady, almost commanding. "I need to make love. Don't move." Elias froze, not because of the words, but because of the pain behind them. He should have shut the door. Any sensible man would have, but loneliness does strange things to the soul. He noticed her hands trembling, her breath uneven, the way she stood as if holding herself together by force alone. She was a giant of a woman, not just in height, but in grief. She told him she was a widow, newly buried husband, newly buried hope. She had walked for miles because the walls of her own home were closing in on her. Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped aside and let her in, not as an invitation of desire, but of humanity. He offered her water, then a chair. She stood until he asked her gently to sit. When she finally did, the room felt smaller, warmer, charged. She spoke of nights that screamed too loudly, of memories that wouldn't loosen their grip. Elias listened, saying nothing, doing something no one had done for her since the funeral. He stayed. He didn't reach for her. He didn't take advantage. He simply listened as the storm poured out of her. Hours passed. The fire burned low. And when she finally looked up at him, confused, almost angry, she whispered, "Why aren't you touching me?" Elias swallowed hard and replied with words that would later shock the entire valley. Because wanting isn't the same as using, and pain doesn't need more pain. In that moment, something shifted. She didn't come for what she thought she needed. She came for what she'd forgotten existed: dignity, safety, and the possibility that not all men take when they're offered something broken. Morning came quietly, as if the world itself was afraid to disturb what had happened. She had slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket Elias once shared with his wife. He stayed in the chair all night, guarding the silence. When she woke, she looked at him like a woman seeing daylight after a long burial. She expected regret. Instead, she found peace. Over breakfast, she asked him why he lived alone, why his eyes carried the same emptiness as hers. He told her everything: the sickness, the funeral, the way love can turn a house into a tomb when it leaves. She listened the way he had listened to her, with no hurry, no judgment. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. The whole valley would later whisper about what happened next, but none of them would get it right. She turned to him and said softly, "Last night, you shocked me." Elias met her gaze. "Good," he said. "Because the world already expects men like me to take, I wanted to give." She reached out then, not with desperation, but gratitude, and rested her forehead against his chest. There was no rush, no demand, just 2 broken people standing still long enough to breathe again. In the weeks that followed, she returned, not at night, but in daylight. They talked, they worked the land together. The ranch changed, Elias changed, and so did she. People expected scandal. Instead, they witnessed something rarer: healing. When the valley finally learned the truth that the lonely rancher refused to take advantage of a grieving giant widow, that he chose respect over desire, it shocked everyone. Some mocked him, others admired him, but she knew the truth. Strength isn't proven in conquest, it's proven in restraint. And love doesn't always begin in passion, it begins in safety. On the day she moved into the small room at the end of the hall, she smiled and said, "You still didn't move that night." Elias smiled back, "Neither did you." And that was how a single moment of restraint turned into a lifetime of companionship. If this story moved you, surprised you, or made you think differently about love and strength, subscribe to the channel now. because the most powerful stories aren't about what people do in the dark, but what they choose not to do when it matters most.